The first time I felt the nausea, I blamed it on the stress of running the family business alone since my husband's death 3 years ago. The second time, I thought perhaps the chicken had been undercooked. By the third time, as I clutched the bathroom sink and watched my reflection grow paler in the mirror, a terrible whisper of doubt crept into my mind. But I pushed it away. Mothers don't think such things about their sons. We simply don't. My name is Catherine Marlowe, and at 62, I had built a life I was proud of. My late husband Thomas and I had started Marlowe Manufacturing from nothing, a small factory that produced precision components for medical equipment. Over 35 years, we'd grown it into a company worth nearly $8 million, employing over 200 people in our town. Thomas had been gone since a sudden heart attack took him in his sleep, and I'd shouldered the burden of running everything alone, though I'd always planned to hand it over to our son Marcus when the time was right. Marcus was 34, my only child, and the center of my universe. After his father died, he'd moved back into the family home, ostensibly to keep me company and help with the business. According to YouTube analytics, 99% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. He'd always been charming, with Thomas's quick smile and my dark hair, now touched with distinguished gray at the temples. He worked in our sales division, though his attendance had been spotty at best. I'd made excuses for him, as mothers do. He was grieving. He needed time. He was finding his way. The illness began in early September, just after Marcus had moved back home. At first, it was subtle. Occasional stomach cramps, mild headaches, a general feeling of malaise. I attributed it to age, to grief that still ambushed me at unexpected moments, to the weight of responsibility. But as weeks passed, the symptoms intensified. The nausea became violent. My hands developed tremors. My hair began falling out in alarming clumps. I lost 15 pounds in a month. "Mom, you need to see a doctor," Marcus said one evening as I barely touched my dinner, a meal he'd lovingly prepared. He'd taken over most of the cooking, insisting I needed to rest more. "You're not looking well." "I'm fine, sweetheart," I assured him, though I wasn't. Just tired. But I did go to the doctor. Dr. Sarah Chen had been my physician for 20 years, and the concern in her eyes frightened me more than the symptoms themselves. She ran extensive blood work, testing for everything from thyroid problems to cancer. When she called me back to her office a week later, her expression was grave. "Catherine, your results are troubling," she said, pulling up charts on her computer screen. "Your liver enzymes are elevated, your kidney function is compromised, and there are some unusual markers in your blood work. I'm seeing signs consistent with heavy metal poisoning, possibly arsenic." The room seemed to tilt. "That's impossible. How could I have been exposed to arsenic?" "That's what we need to determine. It can happen through contaminated water, industrial exposure, or," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "or deliberate administration. Given the levels I'm seeing, this is an accidental exposure. Catherine, is there anyone who might want to harm you?" I laughed, actually laughed, because the idea was absurd. No, of course not. There must be some mistake. But Dr. Chen insisted on filing a report and starting chelation therapy immediately to remove the toxins from my system. She also insisted I try to identify the source. I went home in a daze, my mind refusing to process the implications. That evening, I sat in Thomas's study, surrounded by his books and the faint smell of his cologne that still lingered in the leather chair. I thought about my life, about who had access to my food, my water, my daily routines. The answer was unavoidable, yet impossible to accept. Marcus. Only Marcus. I began to watch him differently after that, hating myself for it. I noticed how he always prepared my meals, how he insisted on bringing me my morning coffee, how he'd become irritated if I ate out or prepared my own food. I noticed the way his eyes followed me when I drank the tea he made, a calculating expression quickly masked by concern. One afternoon, when Marcus was at work, I searched his room. My hands shook as I opened drawers, feeling like an intruder in my own home, betraying my own child. In the back of his closet, behind shoeboxes and old college textbooks, I found a small wooden box. Inside were several bottles with no labels, their contents a white crystalline powder. My heart hammered as I photographed them with my phone, then carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. I took the photos to Dr. Chen, who contacted the police. 2 days later, a detective named Rodriguez sat in my living room, his kind eyes full of pity that made me want to scream. "Mrs. Marlowe, we've analyzed the substance based on your photos. It's consistent with arsenic trioxide. Combined with your blood work and medical history, we have enough for an investigation." He paused. "But I have to tell you, these cases are difficult. We'll need concrete evidence of administration, and frankly, most prosecutors won't move forward without more proof. Does your son know you're aware of this?" "No?" I whispered. "He can't know. Not yet. Be careful," Detective Rodriguez warned. "If he realizes you're onto him, he might accelerate his plans or dispose of evidence." After he left, I sat in the growing darkness, unable to turn on the lights, unable to move. My son was trying to kill me. My boy, whom I'd rocked through nightmares and nursed through fevers, who'd called me his best friend, who still kissed my cheek every morning. The boy for whom I'd sacrificed everything was systematically poisoning me, presumably for my money, for the business, for the life insurance policy worth $2 million. The following weeks were torture. Dr. Chen's chelation treatments helped, and I began to feel marginally better physically, but the emotional devastation was total. I had to pretend everything was normal while living with a would-be murderer. I had to smile at Marcus across the dinner table while secretly dumping food he'd prepared. I had to accept his concerned questions about my health while knowing he was the cause. "You're looking better, Mom," he said one morning in mid-October, disappointment flickering across his face before he masked it with a smile. "Whatever the doctors are doing must be working." "Yes," I said carefully. "I'm feeling stronger." I watched his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. That night, I heard him on the phone in his room, his voice low and urgent. I crept closer to listen, shame burning through me even as I pressed my ear to the door. "Taking too long. She's getting better instead of worse. I need the money now. The debts won't wait. No, you don't understand. I'm in deep with these people. 6 months, they said. If I don't pay them back, they'll kill me." I backed away, my hand over my mouth to stifle a sound. So that was it. Marcus was in debt to dangerous people, probably gambling debts given his expensive clothes and the sports car he'd bought last year. He needed money fast, and murdering his mother was faster than waiting for nature to take its course or for me to hand over the business. Detective Rodriguez advised me to continue documenting everything while they built their case. I installed a hidden camera in the kitchen, though the thought of spying on my own son made me physically ill, but it proved invaluable. 3 days later, the camera caught Marcus in the act. I watched the footage with Detective Rodriguez, both of us silent as we observed Marcus remove a small vial from his pocket, look around carefully, and pour white powder into the container of sugar I used for my morning coffee. He stirred it carefully, ensuring it mixed completely, then replaced the container exactly where it had been. "We have him," Rodriguez said quietly. "This is enough." But I asked him to wait. Some instinct told me that karma had its own timeline, and rushing now might derail justice. The detective was reluctant, but agreed to hold off for a few more days while ensuring I didn't consume anything Marcus prepared. That decision proved prescient. The very next morning, Marcus received a phone call that I overheard from the hallway. His voice was panicked, desperate. "You can't do this now. I told you, I need more time. She's my mother. It's not as simple as, no, please, just another month. Hello? Hello?" He emerged from his room, his face gray with fear. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Everything okay, dear?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Fine, Mom. Everything's fine." But his hands shook as he poured himself coffee, and he didn't meet my eyes. That afternoon, while Marcus was waiting out, I received a call from Janet, my assistant at Marlowe Manufacturing. Her voice was tight with concern. "Mrs. Marlowe, I thought you should know. Marcus was here today, trying to access the company accounts. He was asking about liquidating assets, moving money around. I denied his requests, of course, since he doesn't have signing authority, but he became quite aggressive. I had to call security." My heart sank. He was getting desperate. Desperate people did reckless things. I called Detective Rodriguez immediately. "Whatever's going to happen, it's going to happen soon. He's running out of time with whoever he owes money to, and he just tried to access company funds." "We'll move tonight," Rodriguez promised. I'll have officers positioned around your house. If he makes any move against you, we'll intervene immediately. That evening, I prepared myself for what might be my last night with my son. I dressed carefully, as if for a funeral, in a navy dress Thomas had always loved. I went through old photo albums, looking at pictures of Marcus as a child, missing his front teeth, holding his first trophy, graduating from college with his father's proud arm around his shoulders. Where had I gone wrong? What had I missed? Marcus came home late, and I heard him moving around in the kitchen. My hidden camera would be recording everything. I stayed in my room, my door locked, and waited. Around midnight, I heard him climbing the stairs. His footsteps paused outside my door, and in that moment, I held my breath, wondering if tonight was the night he'd abandon subtlety for something more direct. But he moved on to his own room, and I slowly exhaled. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Marcus in the kitchen, preparing breakfast with unusual care. Eggs, bacon, toast, and a fresh pot of coffee. "Good morning, Mom," he said, his smile bright but his eyes empty. "I made your favorite." "How lovely," I said, settling at the table. "You're such a good son." I watched as he poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one that said "World's Best Mom," that he'd given me years ago. The irony was suffocating. He set it before me with a flourish, then sat down across from me with his own plate. "I've been thinking," he said carefully, "about the business. I know you've been running yourself ragged trying to manage everything. What if we made me a full partner, equal signing authority, equal ownership? You deserve to retire, to rest." There it was, the end game. If he had equal ownership, my death would transfer only half the company to other relatives. But as sole heir with my death appearing natural, he'd inherit everything clean. "That's a generous offer," I said slowly, lifting the mug. Marcus watched intently as I brought it toward my lips. "But I think I'll hold on to control a bit longer." I set the mug down without drinking, watching his expression crumble into frustration before he caught himself. "Of course, Mom. Whatever you think is best." The doorbell rang, shattering the tension. Marcus's head snapped toward the sound, his body going rigid. "I'll get it," I said, standing. My legs felt weak, but I walked steadily to the door. Detective Rodriguez stood on my porch with two uniformed officers. "Mrs. Marlowe," he said formally, "we need to speak with Marcus Marlowe." Marcus appeared in the hallway behind me, his face draining of color. "What's this about?" "Marcus Marlowe, we have a warrant for your arrest for attempted murder and fraud. We need you to come with us." What happened next was chaos. Marcus actually ran, bolting toward the back door, but officers were positioned there too, and they caught him in the kitchen, forcing him to the ground as he shouted protests and denials. "Mom, Mom, tell them it's a mistake. I would never hurt you. Mom, please." I stood frozen in the hallway, unable to speak, unable to move, as they handcuffed my son and read him his rights. His eyes found mine, and I saw panic there, then calculation, then finally cold hatred. "You set me up," he hissed. "Your own son." "No, Marcus," I said, my voice breaking. "You tried to murder me, your own mother." They took him away, and I collapsed on the floor, great racking sobs tearing through me. Detective Rodriguez helped me to a chair, his presence steady and patient as I fell apart. The trial was scheduled for 3 months later, but karma wasn't finished with Marcus yet. Not even close. Within a week of his arrest, news of his attempted matricide spread through our small town like wildfire. The Marlowe name, which had stood for integrity and community service for decades, was now associated with greed and betrayal. The business suffered as clients questioned whether they wanted to associate with such a family. I held press conferences, promising that Marcus had acted alone, that I remained committed to our company's values. Slowly, painfully, we began to rebuild trust. But Marcus's troubles were only beginning. In jail, unable to make bail, which I refused to post, he became vulnerable. The people he owed money to, the dangerous people who'd given him 6 months to pay up, learned of his arrest and decided to cut their losses. 2 men visited him in jail, delivering a message through his cellmate. They wanted their money immediately, or they'd collect in other ways. Marcus, terrified, tried to bargain for time he didn't have. Then came the revelation that destroyed any sympathy he might have garnered. During the discovery phase of his trial, prosecutors uncovered Marcus's elaborate gambling debts, over $400,000 owed to an illegal sports betting ring with connections to organized crime. But they found something else too. A second life insurance policy Marcus had taken out on me 6 months earlier, forging my signature. The policy was worth another $3 million. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Margaret Voss, laid it all out during pretrial hearings. Mr. Marlowe didn't just try to kill his mother, he planned it meticulously. He researched arsenic poisoning online. We have his search history. He purchased the poison through dark web marketplaces. We have the Bitcoin transactions. He calculated how long it would take, how to make it look like natural causes. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated murder of the woman who gave him life, who gave him everything. The media, which initially had covered the story with sensationalism, turned on Marcus completely. Op-eds appeared about the depths of human greed and the sanctity of the mother-child bond. Marcus's face became synonymous with betrayal. Old friends came forward with stories about his selfishness, his sense of entitlement, his complete lack of empathy. A portrait emerged of a narcissist who'd hidden his true nature behind charm and his parents' good name. Meanwhile, I underwent intensive therapy to process the trauma. My therapist, Dr. Ellen Morrison, helped me understand that Marcus's choices were his own, that I hadn't failed as a mother, but rather had been victimized by someone incapable of genuine love. Some people are born with something broken inside, Dr. Morrison explained during one particularly difficult session. You gave him every advantage, every opportunity to become a good person. His choices reflect who he is, not who you are. As the trial date approached, karma delivered another blow to Marcus. His cellmate, a man named Danny Ruiz, who was awaiting trial for armed robbery, was actually a father of 3 daughters. When he learned the full details of what Marcus had done, trying to poison his own mother for money, Danny's outrage was swift and brutal. One morning, Marcus was found in his cell with 2 broken ribs and a fractured jaw, courtesy of Danny's sense of justice. "What happened?" the guards asked Danny, who simply shrugged. "He fell," Danny said flatly. No one believed him, but no one pressed charges either. There's a hierarchy even in prison, and those who harm their mothers rank at the very bottom. The trial began on a cold January morning. I sat in the front row, wearing black, my hands folded in my lap. I'd lost more weight. My hair had grown back silver and shorter, and I looked every one of my 62 years. But I held my head high as I watched my son shuffle into the courtroom in chains, his face still bruised from Danny's lesson. Marcus's attorney, a public defender overwhelmed by the evidence against his client, tried to argue mental instability, claiming Marcus had been under extreme duress from his creditors. But Prosecutor Voss demolished that defense with cold precision. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Marcus Marlowe wasn't insane. He was greedy. He wasn't desperate. He was entitled. He looked at his mother, the woman who raised him, who built a business to secure his future, who loved him unconditionally, and he saw only a barrier between himself and money. He hadn't earned. He calculated that her life was worth less than his debts, less than his lifestyle, less than his comfort. I took the stand on the 3rd day. Facing Marcus across the courtroom was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. He wouldn't meet my eyes at first, staring at the table, but Prosecutor Voss's questions forced him to look up. "Mrs. Marlowe, can you describe your relationship with your son before September of last year?" "I loved him," I said simply, my voice clear, despite the tears streaming down my face. "I loved him more than anything in this world. He was my purpose, my joy. I would have given him anything he asked for. He just had to ask. He never had to kill me for it." Marcus's face crumbled then, and he wept openly in the courtroom. But I couldn't tell if they were tears of remorse or self-pity. I suspected the latter. The evidence was overwhelming. The security footage of Marcus poisoning my sugar, his internet search history, how long does arsenic take to kill, symptoms of arsenic poisoning, do they test for arsenic in autopsies, how to forge insurance documents, the testimony from Dr. Chen about my mysterious illness and sudden improvement once I stopped consuming food and drink prepared by Marcus, the forged insurance policy, the gambling debts, the bottles of arsenic found in his possession. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts, including attempted murder, fraud, and forgery. Marcus was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The judge, a gray haired woman named Judith Hartwell, delivered a scorching statement before pronouncing sentence. Mr. Marlowe, in 30 years on this bench, I have never encountered a case that more profoundly represented the depths of human selfishness and depravity. You targeted the person who loved you most in this world, who trusted you absolutely, and you exploited that trust to try to end her life for financial gain. You showed no mercy, no hesitation, no conscience. Therefore, this court will show you none of the leniency you denied your mother. I hereby sentence you to 25 years to life in the state penitentiary, with no possibility of parole before the full 25 years are served. As Marcus was led away, he finally looked at me directly. There was no remorse in his eyes, only resentment and rage. In that moment, I knew Dr. Morrison had been right. Something essential had always been missing in him, something that made him human. I'd just been too blinded by love to see it. But karma still wasn't finished. Within months of Marcus entering the state penitentiary, his gambling creditors found him there too. In prison, debts have a way of transferring to other enforcement mechanisms. Marcus, marked as a mother killer, and now owing money to people with long reaches, became a target. He was moved to protective custody after an incident in the prison yard that left him with a knife wound to his shoulder. Protective custody meant solitary confinement, 23 hours a day in a small cell, alone with his thoughts and his choices. Meanwhile, I began to heal. The chelation therapy had removed the arsenic from my system, and my body slowly recovered its strength. My hair grew back, thick and silver. I gained weight. The tremors in my hands ceased. Physically, I was whole again. Emotionally, the journey was longer. I joined a support group for parents whose children had harmed them, and I discovered I wasn't alone. There was the mother whose daughter had hired a hitman, the father whose son had set fire to their house with them inside. We shared our guilt, our grief, our incomprehension. We helped each other understand that love doesn't always transform people, that sometimes the best we can do is survive and rebuild. I threw myself into the business with renewed purpose. Marlowe Manufacturing didn't just survive the scandal, it thrived. I implemented new ethics programs, established a scholarship fund for underprivileged students, and increased our charitable giving. I wanted to rebuild the Marlowe name to mean something good again, to prove that one person's evil choices didn't define a family's legacy. A year after the trial, I received a letter from Marcus. It had been opened and read by prison officials before being forwarded to me, as all his correspondence was monitored. I stared at it for a long time before opening it, my hands steady now, my heart guarded. The letter was short. Mom, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to write. Not to apologize. I know words can't fix what I did. I just needed you to know that I think about it every day. In this cell, alone, I have nothing but time to think about my choices. I wish I could say I didn't understand what I was doing, that I was someone else, that it wasn't really me, but it was. I chose money over you. I chose my own comfort over your life. I chose to be the person I became. The gambling debts were real, but that's not why I did it. I did it because I was impatient, because I felt entitled to what you'd built, because I looked at you and saw an obstacle instead of a person. That's who I am, Mom. That's who I've always been. You just loved me too much to see it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that karma didn't just take my freedom. It took everything else too. My health, because the stress and the beatings destroyed my body. My sanity, because solitary confinement is a special kind of hell. My future, because I'll die in here. But most of all, it took my ability to lie to myself. I can't pretend anymore. I have to face what I am. And it's worse than any punishment the court could give. You deserved better than me. You deserved a son who loved you the way you loved him. I'm sorry I wasn't that person. I'm sorry I was the monster who tried to take your life. I don't ask you to write back. I just needed you to know that karma was watching, just like you said it would be. And it's still watching. Every single day, Marcus. I read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Perhaps that made me cruel, but I had nothing to say to him. Dr. Morrison said it was fine not to forgive, that forgiveness wasn't required for healing. I was still working on that concept. 2 years after the trial, I stood at the annual company celebration, surrounded by our employees and their families. Marlowe Manufacturing had just posted record profits, and we'd expanded our operations to include a new facility that would create 50 additional jobs. I looked out at the faces of people who depended on us, who trusted us, and felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. My husband Thomas and I built this company on the foundation of integrity and community. I told the gathered crowd. 2 years ago, that foundation was shaken by events many of you know about. But you stood by us. You believed in what we represented, not in one person's choices. Tonight, I want to honor that faith by announcing the Thomas Marlowe Memorial Foundation, which will provide college scholarships to children of our employees and to deserving students in our community. Because legacy isn't about one generation. It's about what we build together and who we lift up along the way. The applause was thunderous, and I felt tears sting my eyes, but they were good tears now, healing tears. Janet found me afterward, wrapping me in a warm hug. You did it, Catherine. You took something terrible and turned it into something beautiful. We did it, I corrected. All of us. That night, alone in the house that no longer felt haunted by Marcus's presence, I sat in Thomas's study and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. Marcus had made his choices, and he was living with the consequence. That was karma, not some mystical force, but simply the natural result of actions meeting reality. He was in prison, suffering the loneliness and fear he'd tried to inflict on me through slow death. He'd lost his freedom, his health, his future, and most painfully, the ability to deceive himself about who he was. Every day he faced the truth of his own soul, and that was perhaps the cruelest punishment of all. Meanwhile, I was free, free from his presence, free from the poison literal and metaphorical, free from the burden of loving someone who was incapable of loving me back. I'd mourned my son as surely as I'd mourned my husband, but I was no longer the woman who'd clutched that bathroom sink 3 years ago, weak and betrayed and broken. I was stronger now, wiser, more careful with my trust, but not closed off. I'd learned that resilience wasn't about never falling down, but about standing back up, even when everything inside you screamed to stay down. The business thrived. The community embraced us again. I found meaning in mentoring young women entrepreneurs, in building something that would outlast me, in proving that one person's evil couldn't destroy the good that others created. And Marcus learned what so many before him had learned, that karma doesn't need our help. It doesn't require revenge or retaliation. It simply asks that we be true to ourselves and trust that truth will prevail. His truth was selfishness and greed, and it had consumed him from the inside out. My truth was resilience and purpose, and it had set me free. 3 years after his conviction, I heard through the prison chaplain who occasionally wrote to me that Marcus had attempted suicide. They'd stopped him in time, but it told me everything about his state of mind. The karma he faced every day in that cell was more than he could bear. I didn't visit him in the hospital wing. I didn't send a card. I simply acknowledged the information and went about my day, because I'd learned something important. You can love someone and still let them go. You can mourn who they might have been while refusing to be destroyed by who they became. On the 4th anniversary of the day, I discovered the bottles in his closet. I planted a garden in Thomas's memory in our backyard. Roses and lavender and herbs that filled the air with sweetness. I worked in that garden every evening, my hands in the soil, growing things instead of destroying them. One evening, as the sun set golden over the flower beds, I realized I was happy. Not in spite of what had happened, but because I'd survived it. I'd faced the worst betrayal possible and come out the other side still believing in goodness, still capable of trust, still able to build and love and hope. That was the real victory karma had given me, not Marcus's suffering, though that came naturally from his choices. The victory was my own transformation from victim to survivor, from broken to whole, from the woman who couldn't believe her son would hurt her, to the woman who understood that some people will hurt anyone and that their choices reflected only on themselves. I was 66 now, Still running Marlowe Manufacturing, still mentoring young entrepreneurs, still working in my garden each evening. My hair was silver, my face lined with years and experiences, but my eyes were clear and my heart was at peace. Marcus was still in prison, facing 2 more decades before even the possibility of parole. I heard occasionally about his struggles there, about his declining health and deteriorating mental state. I felt no satisfaction in his suffering, but I felt no obligation to ease it either. He'd chosen his path, and karma had simply let him walk it to its natural conclusion. As for me, I'd chosen a different path. I'd chosen to take the poison he'd given me, literal and figurative, and transform it into medicine, into wisdom, into strength. That was the real story. Not that my son tried to kill me, though he did. Not that karma punished him, though it did. The real story was that I survived. I healed. I built something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. And every morning when I woke up, I was grateful for the life I still had, the second chance his failure had given me. I was grateful for the poison that didn't kill me, and the love that turned out to be strong enough to endure even its own betrayal. Karma had indeed been watching the whole time, but so had I. And in the end, we both knew the truth. That poison may harm the body, but resilience heals the soul, and that's the only victory that truly matters.